Nolan's been on a serious war movie kick lately. Two of his last three films were about World War II, and you just know his next big movie, Odyssey, set in ancient Greece, is going to have some epic battles too. But Nolan's not shy about saying he's inspired by classic war films. Actually, before shooting, he even screened certain movies for his cast and crew. So here's a look at some of the war movies Nolan personally calls masterpieces, and why he thinks they're such a big influence. Let's start with The Hill, a Sean Connery film hardly anyone talks about, even though Connery himself saw it as a personal victory. After making this, he finally started landing more serious roles, and Nolan straight up called this film an extraordinary piece of work. It's set during World War II in a British military prison in North Africa. Connery plays a soldier who's been court-martialed for punching an officer. Now he's stuck in a prison camp where the guards don't really care what you did, they're just there to break you. The main punishment is this huge hill they force prisoners to climb again and again. It's basically torture, run by this sadistic sergeant played by Harry Andrews. The script was written by Ray Rigby, who actually spent time in a military prison himself during World War II, so it feels authentic. When Nolan first saw it, he was completely blown away. He even screened a 35mm print of it with his cinematographer before making Oppenheimer, specifically to study how Oswald Morris shot intense, intimate black and white scenes in tight spaces. Nolan said it helped them tame the camera into intimacy, especially during crowded or high-tension scenes. Nolan might be the closest thing we've got today to another Steven Spielberg, a director whose name alone guarantees a huge audience. Nolan openly admits Spielberg inspired him to leave big-budget sci-fi behind and start making serious historical films like Dunkirk. And specifically, he used Saving Private Ryan as a big reference point. He even called Spielberg directly for advice before filming Dunkirk. Nolan admitted Spielberg's famous D-Day landing scene still completely rattles him, calling it truly horrific, and said, "We didn't want to compete with that. It's such an achievement." Nolan knew right away he'd have to find a totally different kind of tension for his own movie. Spielberg himself once said he made Saving Private Ryan thinking hardly anyone would even watch it. He just wanted to tell the truth. Obviously, way more people saw it than he ever imagined. Next, we've got the Battle of Algiers, one of the most politically intense war movies ever. Nolan's been very clear about how much it influenced him, especially with Dunkirk. The movie covers the Algerian War for Independence against French colonial rule in the 50s. It's shot documentary style, handheld cameras, no famous actors, real locations, feels completely realistic. There aren't big speeches or Hollywood heroics. You get bombings, interrogations, riots, no easy moral lines at all. It's completely intense and was so controversial it got banned in France for years. Nolan said it taught him how to create tension without traditional storytelling. He called it a timeless and affecting narrative and said it works because the film just immerses you completely in the character's reality. No need for big backstories, you're just instantly pulled in. This was Hitchcock's second American movie, often overlooked, but Nolan's a big fan. It's about an American reporter sent to Europe just as World War II is about to break out. He gets mixed up in political assassinations, conspiracies, and spies. And of course, it's pure Hitchcock suspense, including a spectacular plane crash into the ocean that still impresses today. Nolan made sure to highlight it during the Dunkirk press tour, pointing to Hitchcock's practical effects as a major inspiration. Not CGI, just clever filmmaking. He specifically mentioned that incredible plane crash scene and praised Hitchcock's use of rear projection and camera tricks to pull off huge action scenes on a tiny budget. According to Nolan, no examination of cinematic suspense and visual storytelling would be complete without Hitchcock, and his technical virtuosity in Foreign Correspondent provided inspiration for much of what we attempted in Dunkirk. If you're watching Oppenheimer and wondering where some of that paranoia comes from, check out The Manchurian Candidate with Frank Sinatra. It takes place just after the Korean War. An American soldier is captured, brainwashed by communists, then sent home as a war hero, but secretly programmed to sabotage the next election. Sinatra plays his former commanding officer who slowly figures out what's happening. Nolan specifically pointed to this movie when talking about the Lewis storyline in Oppenheimer. All that paranoia and anti-communist fear driving people out of government jobs. The Manchurian Candidate was so politically sensitive back then, it got completely banned across the Soviet bloc. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and even neutral countries like Sweden and Finland refused to screen it. United Artists initially wanted nothing to do with releasing it. Frank Sinatra literally had to call up President Kennedy, whose 1960 campaign Sinatra had helped raise millions for. Kennedy actually loved the book and personally gave it the thumbs up. Only then did the studio finally agree to release it. Nolan straight up loves this one. He's mentioned it a lot as one of his all-time favorite war films. Directed by Terrence Malick, it covers the Battle of Guadalcanal during World War II, but it's totally different from something like Saving Private Ryan, which actually came out just a few months earlier. That comparison hurt it at the box office. People were expecting straight-up combat action, and got Malick's philosophical style instead. And that's exactly why Nolan digs it. It's way more reflective, way more internal. You spend tons of time inside the soldiers' heads, listening to their inner thoughts, their memories, their fears. It actually influenced Nolan a lot when he made Memento, specifically the scenes where Guy Pearce remembers his wife. Nolan said those emotional memory cuts, done without fades or special effects, came directly from how Malick structured this film. During press for Oppenheimer, Nolan talked again about this movie. He said it showed him how to handle massive violence and chaos while still staying inside the characters' heads, called it an extraordinary poetic vision of war, and said it completely changed how he thought about cutting to internal experience without spoon-feeding the audience visual clues. You can't really talk about epic movies without mentioning Lawrence of Arabia. David Lean's huge, sweeping story of British officer and his experiences in World War I pretty much set the standard for cinematic epics. And Nolan's been upfront about how much it impacted him from early on. He said watching it when he was young actually shaped him as a filmmaker. Lean's approach to shooting on actual film stock is something Nolan still insists on doing himself. And when he made Oppenheimer, Nolan openly said he was trying to channel Lean's style, especially the complex character struggling with big moral conflicts and loyalty issues. At over 3.5 hours, it's easily the longest movie on Nolan's favorites list, but he's mentioned several times he never gets bored watching it, still revisits it every few years. Nolan even called it the kind of war movie you could watch with family at Christmas. It's epic, personal, and totally timeless. This is basically the perfect double feature with Oppenheimer. Even Nolan himself said so. It's about a rogue American general accidentally launching a nuclear attack on Russia and the frantic attempts to prevent worldwide Armageddon. But even though Nolan absolutely loves this film, he purposely avoided watching it during Oppenheimer's production. He was genuinely worried about accidentally imitating Kubrick's famous war room scenes. Nolan admitted it openly. It was literally impossible not to think about those iconic moments, all the politicians and generals arguing over the fate of humanity. Obviously, totally different tone. Kubrick was satirizing nuclear panic, but Nolan's 3-hour epic shares that same intense, behind-closed-doors tension. Forget about the Netflix remake. Nolan's very specific. He's talking about the original 1930 version here. It's one of the most brutal anti-war movies ever made. You're right there in the trenches with these young German soldiers whose romantic ideas about war get destroyed in minutes. When Nolan made Dunkirk, he explicitly called this film his key touchstone, the original ultimate movie statement on how war strips people of humanity. Nolan praised it specifically for refusing to pretend there's some grand logic or meaning behind individual fates in war. It just shows the intensity and horror honestly. In Nolan's own words, the original All Quiet said it first and said it best. War simply dehumanizes people. For him, no film since has ever captured that intensity better. Everyone's praising Cillian Murphy's performance in Oppenheimer, obviously, but Tom Conti's role as Albert Einstein getting a lot of love too. Nolan previously worked with Conti in The Dark Knight Rises, but actually, he thinks Conti's best work was in this underrated World War II drama. Conti plays John Lawrence, a British officer held prisoner in a Japanese camp during the war, stuck in the middle between captors and prisoners. Nolan praised this performance directly, called Conti an incredibly sympathetic guide through this complicated, emotional story. David Bowie's in this one too. Great performance, even though he's not the main character. Actually, Nolan loved Bowie's acting so much here that it directly led him to cast Bowie years later in The Prestige. He praised Bowie's charisma here, saying this film was one of the few that genuinely captured what made Bowie so compelling on screen.